Good evening, everyone. I am ready to read, and I'm hoping you're ready to fall asleep while I'm reading. We're back in Mr. Martin's, or I should say, the Martin family game room, which we moved in about 9 months ago, and we're still getting things organized. You can see in the back my painting station. And hey, Jared, how are you? I don't know if you guys can see. That is really who runs our house. That is Stella. We call her Miss Thing because she thinks she's the boss. And she was just yelling at me a few minutes ago, so hopefully while I read, she won't yell at me anymore. But I'm going to wait just one more minute, and then we'll get reading. For those of you that weren't with us last night, we started reading a book called April Morning. I know the light is kind of weird here. There you go. April Morning. And we met a young man by the name of Adam Cooper. And Adam is, I got to get a new chair. This chair is too squeaky. Adam Cooper is a 15-year-old boy who has a very serious relationship with his God-fearing father. He has a very special relationship with his grandmother. We don't know too much about him and his mom yet, but we also have met his little brother Levi. And we left off last night, and Adam's dad was giving him some static at the dinner table. They were having dinner, and they were eating this meat contraption. At the end of the week, you leave all your meat scraps from the week, and at the end of the week, you take them all together, and then you kind of make them and mash them into one meal. Today, we call it scrapple. It's actually sold at the grocery store. I bet most of you probably haven't had it, but it wouldn't surprise me if your grandparents have had it. I've had it before. It's an acquired taste. But that's where we left off last night. So let's pick up. So Granny is yelling at her son. Don't you stop me in the middle of a sentence, Moses Cooper. I didn't stop you in the middle of a sentence. Not to mention pride, Granny went on. It goeth before a fall, or doesn't it? And if that wasn't the most prideful statement I've ever listened to, then I don't know what was. I spell may be unchristian and ignorant, but let me remind you, the Testament says about pride. I know what the Testament says about pride, Mother. We were interrupted at that point, and I don't know where it would have gone on to. My mother was nervous and upset over the whole thing. Levi was sunk in gloom, brooding on what I might do to him later. And very disturbed was Granny had gone after Father the way that she had. But I was enjoying in the way you enjoy running on the edge of a high stone cliff. It's exhilarating while it lasts. It finished because Joseph Simmons, our neighbor and kin, came in and gave his greeting. He said that he would just sit down in the empty chair and watch us a while we finish our evening bread. But he wouldn't have a thing to eat. A mouthful would be too much, as he had just finished his own supper. But then he saw that we were having donkers. That was that meat contraption, donkers. And he admitted that he might try one. He was inordinately fond of them, and since it didn't go alone, he'd have a mouthful of boiled pudding on the plate. Mother gave him hot meat from the fire, and it was a pleasure to see his face when he took the first bite. He was a big, heavy-set man, and I never saw anyone to match him for straightforward pleasure in food. Goody Cooper, he said to my mother, I don't recollect a more delicious meat than your donkers. But neither do I recollect any home of yours where they are favored. They're not proper English food, said Mother. They're Dutch food. Now, what do you know? You see, my grandfather Isaac, he was in the coasting trade. I've heard about your grandfather Isaac. Indeed, says Mr. Simmons. Unlike my father, he did not have to stop eating to talk. He did both at once. He said respectfully but nervously, and it gave my mother a twinge. He pretends not to know how many have heard and gossiped about her grandfather Isaac. You know, one wife and family in Boston, another wife and family in Philadelphia. But the knowledge was widespread. The fact that the Philadelphia wife was one half Shawnee Indian and had never been baptized, as the story went, gave the gossip and added Philip. While her grandfather Isaac was alive, she couldn't bear to speak to him or listen to him being spoken of. But when he died and left her 200 sovereigns, father said that this sinfulness took a backseat and thoughtfulness. In addition, a sea captain was never judged by the same standards we use to measure a landsman. Of course, mother nodded. One day at sea, his cook died of an argue. I am not reading well tonight. Let me wet my whistle. And again, that is Diet Ginger Ale. Of course, mother nodded. Well, one day at sea, his cook died of ague, and he put into New York Harbor and engaged a Holland cook. And after that, he never could sail with anything but a Holland cook. And he got a good taste for Dutch rights, left and right. When God made man, he gave him a mind to consider with and two hands to set things right. I was just putting in a manner of speaking, Simmons protested. We can't afford to put things in a manner of speaking, Joseph. We have got to set our line clear and proper and prove it all the way. Oh, yes, the pastor will hold our rights divine from God. That's his business. He has to. But you and me, we know well enough that it's only because of a lot of stiff-necked people like ourselves that we have got a knowledge of rights. You consider my Uncle Cyrus in the rum trade. He says he'll die and see his ship and fortune sunken before he hands his trade over to the British. He has the right to trade with the islands because he backs up that right with his life. Same way. I told you, this house of mine is a castle. But that's pure boasting unless the committee backs me up. Do you see? What's he talking about there, right? He's talking about mercantilism. He's talking about how the mother country in England required the colonies to trade with them and only them. And his cousin Cyrus, he wants to sell his rum to whomever. This is one of the problems that the colonists have. Hey, Mr. Chandler, how are you? Meat and Cheese. I don't know who that is. And Bot Legacy. I'm not sure who you are. But this is exactly, guys, what we talked about earlier in the year. Why did we become colonies? Or why did we break away? We no longer wanted to be colonies. I'm tall and strong and only about, I skipped ahead. But Cousin Simmons was slow to see, and they went on discussing it over pie. And afterwards, as they were preparing to leave the house, I stopped my father in the kitchen as they were leaving, and I said to him, I want to go with you to the meeting, Father. Oh? I know that the committee made a rule about 16 years before a man enters. Are you a man now, Adam? I'm tall and strong, and I'm only 9 months away from my 16th birthday. The proof of a man is the will to work and the ability to use his hands and his mind in judgment. Can you offer that proof, Adam? I stared at him in silence. Talk to me when you can, Adam. Then they both left. Granny said that there was more pure nonsense connected with a committee meeting than a body could bear, and she didn't see why I would want to waste an evening hours there. My mother put her arm around my shoulders. Why does he hate me so? I asked them. Hate you, Mother said. Adam, he loves you. You're his son. Then I got love and hate mixed up. What a way to talk, said Mother. How do you expect me to talk? Has he ever said a kind word to me? He chops at me like I was an old dry pine for him to temper his axe on. Whatever I do, it's not right, and no matter how I do it, he finds fault. That's just his way, Adam. It is? Well, it's not my way to like it. I wonder how many of you guys have a relationship like that with a parent. I think it took my dad, and I love him very much, and it took me a long time to realize that he loved me. But it took for my mother passing away last year, so about 46 years, for the first time in his life, in my life, for my dad to really tell me that he loved me. I wonder how many of you guys feel that sometimes about your parents. Granny said to me, "Oh, Adam, Adam, what a fuss to make over a cankerous man who's enamored with the sound of his own voice. Moses Cooper is your father, and I suppose he can't ever be anything else but that to you. But to old Goody Cooper here, he's just a son, just the same as you are, and he's never been any different but the way he is now, pig-headed and full of his own notions. Do you think poor Cousin Simmons could ever have written that statement to suit Moses Cooper? No, sir. Cousin Simmons might be the nicest and most delicate writer in all the country. But that wouldn't satisfy Moses Cooper. He'd find fault. And I'll ever ask him is one kind word. Just so he'd look at me once, as if I wasn't dirt scraped off the barnyard," Adam said. "He just expects more than a soul can deliver," Granny said. I pulled away from Mother and started toward the door. "Where are you going, Adam?" "Out." "Adam, don't press it. Don't go over to the church. If your father sees you there after he ordered you not to come, he'll be very angry. He's always angry anyway. I'm not going to bother their damned committee." "Adam!" I stalked out into the yard, and there was Levi crouching in the shadows. It was dark now. "Adam, go to hell, you little rat," I told him. "You going to lick me, Adam?" "Did I ever lick you?" "No, but there's always a first time, Adam." "There will be if you don't stay out of my way right now." Yikes. Chapter 2. Or it's not even chapter 2, it's part 2 of the book. It's called Evening. I have told you more or less what happened in the afternoon, though the meal time, and I suppose it was for the most part of what happened to me, or what I heard, or what I saw. As far as the afternoon is concerned, I don't think that it makes too much difference, because allowing for our family's characteristics, everyone else in the village was eating their supper at about the same time. It is true that most of them were having chicken or salt pork, but we can accept the fact that in half of our homes, pie was taken for dessert, and you could safely say that 3/4 of them had boiled pudding. There was a sharp dividing line in our town between those women who cooked their boiled pudding in the old-fashioned English way, out of a fine wheat flour and suet. The other half used yellow maize. We had stopped using flour after my father somehow connected English pudding with a conciliative point of view, something which Mother's sewing circle regarded as the highest achievement of logic during the past year. And you may believe that we saw some high moments of logic in our village. If it had been up to Granny, she never would have budged an inch. But my mother gave in, partly because deep down, under everything, she admired Father's gift for argumentation. I once heard her state that she was quite proud of the fact that while Father could have argued any girl in New England into being his wife, he had chosen to persuade her. But there was also the fact that most of Mother's friends had already switched to maize. You would hardly believe this, but the maize flour controversy reached such a pitch of philosophical excitement that there were a few days when half the women in the village stopped talking to the other half. If the Reverend hadn't taken the situation in hand and preached one of the hottest sermons on the relationship of the fruits of the earth to plain, downright human foolishness, I don't know where it would have all ended. So one of the things that they're talking about here is that part of the people are cooking this thing, the pie, with regular flour, and some of them are using maize flour, which means that they're mixing in dried corn. But however the boiled pudding was made, it was eaten widely that night, and on most nights. And afterwards, the men trooped over to the church for the committee meeting. While I wasn't at the meeting, it seems to me that I ought to report something of what went on there. I was in bed when Father came home later that night and heard him give Mother and Granny a full report. But to have things in proper sequence, I will deal with that now, before I tell what happened to me during the evening. The meeting was called to the order by Samuel Hodley, after which Jeremiah Fitz, with a PH, PHITTS, gave the financial report. That went its usual course, ending up with the balance of 12 shillings 6 pence. An assessment of 3 pence on all present was moved and voted. My father reported that a considerable number deferred payment. Samuel Hodley took the floor again and gave the results of the weapons count for the village and the surrounding area. It came to 116 assorted pieces. As near as my father could remember, it broke down somewhat in this fashion. There were 7 close-bore guns with rifle barrels, a small number, but rifles were expensive instruments and the very devil to load. There were some 60-odd smooth-bore guns, which about 10 were old-fashioned firelocks. Among those 60 were 14 British Army guns, which had been traveled to us. That is, they belonged to the committee. A nice way of saying that they were stolen. There were 5 dragoon pistols, but these were the kind that a family bought to show off on the mantle in the sitting room, and it was quite questionable whether they would work or not. All the rest were fowling guns for pepper and salt shot. So what they're talking about is all the different guns that the men own in the surrounding area. One of the things that they're talking about is rifles. During the American Revolution, most of the weapons did not have rifling in the barrel, meaning that the ball came flying out of the gun and it knuckleballed. It just kind of flew. It flew in one direction, but it just kind of floated around. The rifles have a groove, and that groove allows the ball to spiral, kind of like a football. So some of them have those guns, but not many. They're more expensive, and they're taller, which means they're more difficult to load. You've seen it in the movies where they load the guns. So those are more accurate guns, though. And then they talk about a lot of these guns are fowling guns. They're hunting guns. You jam a lot of stuff in them. You see some birds flying in the air. Bam, you shoot at the birds. It's like buckshot today. It's just a lot of little things come flying out of the gun. They're not used for war. They're not used to kill a soldier on the other side. So they're not doing so good when it comes up to fighting toe-to-toe with the British Army, who's got the best weapons, the best training in the world. So Hodley wanted a central shot and powder depot organized in the village because he had read somewhere that any place under siege should have an ammunition depot. But since we were not under siege and most likely never would be, his point was voted down. Then Clarence Pinckney brought up his pet notion about drilling. But April was the wrong month, and to ask hardworking farmers to come out into the sunshine and drill, the matter was put off for a fortnight. Cousin Simmons gave a progress report on the statement he had in preparation, but then the Reverend said a few words of tyranny, taxes, and moral condition of the High Church, the proper place of Oliver Cromwell in the history, as opposed to the current slanders and detractors, and finished by paraphrasing the first 2 books of Maccabees. So it's April. The farmers want to be planting. They want to be turning their fields. They want to get ready to grow their crops for the year. And this one guy's worried. He says, maybe we need to start training. Maybe our Minutemen, right, our militia groups should be training. But they're all telling him, hey, it's time for us to be out in the fields doing work, not training. Some of the more orthodox held that it was presumptuous of the Reverend to push Maccabees the way he did, since these books were more properly apocryphal than divine, but the Reverend would have none of such criticism. We were the brothers of Simon, he said, and if God put such a weapon as Maccabees 1 and 2 into his hand, he would strike with the weapon of shame the gift of the Almighty. I don't remember a case where the Reverend got the worst of that kind of any argument. Next, they took up the discussion of a newspaper. No one really believed that a community as small as ours could actually support a newspaper, nor did anyone ever really sit down with it and try to figure out where the capital for beginning a venture would be found. The round sum of money needed for a printing press, the typefaces, the ink, the newsprint. Instead, the discussion always turned into a hot debate between pro-Samuel Adams radicals and the anti-Samuel Adams egalitarians, since it was Adams who again and again stated that a newspaper must be the connecting link between the committees and the people. As far as our village was concerned, within a few hours after the committee meeting was finished, every soul in the place knew every word that had been spoken. So I failed to see Mr. Adams' point. But such a discussion did provide the philosophical content without which no committee meeting was complete. And it gave my father, who had always dreamed of himself as a newspaper editor, whose flaming words aroused thousands to action, an opportunity to plunge into the fray. I never could understand whether he enjoyed the point Samuel Adams stood for or simply looked upon him as a kindred, cankerous soul. My father rose to speak to this point, and while he repeated to my mother, word for word, everything he had said and good summations of what his opponents had said, I see no purpose in setting it down here. My father hated guns and only accepted them as a burden we had to bear. You could win a war. The final argument, as with always committee meetings, revolved around the question of whether or not minutes should be kept. They're arguing about whether or not they should be writing down what they're talking about. Today in our country, whenever we have a Board of Education meeting, we have a city-town meeting, any type of formal government meeting, minutes are kept. So typically there will be what's called a secretary. That's an officer on whatever board or committee you're talking about. And that person is in charge of writing down the things that people are saying and the things that the people in the government are agreeing to. So as usual, after the timid ones or sensible ones, depending on your point of view, had said their say to the effect that it was one thing to put your head in a noose and something else indeed to be your own hangman, my father rose to the occasion. I am a man of peace, so he told my mother, but it always appeared to me that he was the most belligerent man of peace I had ever encountered. Yet on this point, I rise in anger, indignation, and disappointment. Yes, disappointment. Are we slaves who plot and skulk in secret? Are we conspirators? Are we a pack of bandits planning some dastardly thievery? Or are we free Englishmen born of our own freehold? Destroy the minutes? First I will cut out my heart and destroy it. Shall I be ashamed of this committee? But if the committee is not the noblest thing we have wrought, then how shall we face our brother committees scattered across these 13 colonies? Destroy them. Give me the minutes, and I will bear them home with me, so that my children and their children may see we did not fail to rise when history demanded it. So part of what he's talking about here, guys, is he's talking about speech. He's talking about press. He's talking about we're doing these things. We're saying we're doing these things, and we shouldn't hide. We should be proud of them. We should let history know that we talked about these things and we made these decisions. As usual, Father's oratory carried the day, and the minutes remained where they had always been, on the top shelf of the Reverend's lectern, underneath the Bible. However, Mother asked Father, withal gently, whether he didn't think he had perhaps been a little strong in some of his denunciations and comparisons. Strong feelings demand strong words, he replied. Nevertheless, Moses, I would not want people to go around saying that you make mountains out of molehills. A mountain still in the distance can appear as a molehill, he said. I suppose so. Still, I must confess that I like your reasonable moods better. And what was unreasonable about my opposition to burning the minutes? Are we animals? Slaves? Are we Frenchmen? Now, that's a real insult. Okay, that is a real insult. One of the things we've talked about in class is English, right? A lot of the English that are in our country, even the first several decades of our country, a lot of the people that are coming here are Protestants, right? So those people, at least at this time in our nation's history, those people up in Canada, up to the north, they are French and they are Catholics. They do not like each other. So me, a British colonist, calling you a Frenchman is quite the insult. I didn't mean that at all, Moses. I simply meant that we will be all the better and calmer. And don't be angry, please. Happier when this blows over and our proper rights are granted to us. Father could have found arguments, but he was tired enough to agree with this. A few more minutes of reading, guys, and then we'll get into current events. While Father was at the committee meeting, I decided that I would go over to the Simmons place. I needed sympathy, and Ruth was the most sympathetic person I knew. As a matter of fact, she was sympathetic to a fault, and sometimes it can be downright tiring. But in the mood I was in tonight, I couldn't have too much sympathy. Cousin Simmons was a blacksmith. His father had been a blacksmith. His 5 sons were raised in the trade. 4 of them pooled their capital and purchased half of the shares in a slaver that was running Africans from the West Coast into the Carolinas and West Indies. There was divided opinion on the question of buying shares in slavers. Those shares had handled by commission brokers in Boston and sold from a small shed on the river's edge, but held that since the slavers did not sail out of the Boston port, it was just business and no worse than any other business. And they bolstered their arguments by pointing out the abuses of practice on the sugar plantations and reminding their listeners that there was no Boston family or even modest means that did not have some stake in the rum trade. My father, on the other hand, held that slavers were the lowest form of life's existence on earth, the devil in flesh, the Hammond of our time. The Reverend agreed with him, and between them they carried the expulsion of Noah Cotton from the committee after he invested 5 sovereigns in slavers' shares. So part of what Howard Fast, and Howard Fast is a great author, guys, one of the things that he's bringing up here is that even though up north we were not practicing and owning slaves as they were practicing the institution of slavery in the South and using slaves, people up north were investing in it. So they were giving money to support these companies that were buying slaves and bringing them to our country. When we talked about the Civil War this year, we talked about how Northerners working and owning the mills up north, the cotton mills up north, knew exactly how slaves were being treated, knew what the institution of slavery was like, and that they were as complicit as Southerners were. That's part of what he's talking about here. So that was no mean feat. And while most people accepted my father's position on moral grounds, the profits in slaver shares were enormous. Only 1 thing in 3 brought its cargo through. But when it did, the returns for the investor were magnificent. The ship the Simmons brothers had invested in came through, making them rich as some folk consider riches. And they took the money and opened an ironworks in Connecticut. But Joseph Simmons broke with them and remained a smith in our village. He was a mild man and you would never think to know him that he could be so adamant on a moral question. I, for one, have not found very much to admire in moral people, but he was an exception to the rule. His brothers were dead in his eyes. He would never speak about them or refer to them in any way. Lately, the British had ruined the iron business with their prohibitions, import laws, and colonial taxes, and it had come to our knowledge that the 4 Simmons brothers had joined their local committee and were real firebrands. But that made no difference to Joseph. As for father, he never spoke openly about the various elements that went into committees for various reasons, some of them less than noble, but I knew his opinion. He didn't hold them highly. Well, there you go. British taxes. We talked about that earlier in the year. He talks about how things are going to ruin the businesses here in America because the taxes are becoming so high. All right. Well, thanks for reading with me. And look at all these people joining in. That's great. So let's talk about current events. I told you every night I want to try to read, and every night I want to talk to you about what's going on in the world. And I'll be honest with you, last night I tried to have some good news and some bad news and, just news. And I'm not going to lie, today I had a difficult time kind of searching around and finding good news. Thank you, Mr. Chandler. So, one of the first things, which I don't know, maybe a lot of people don't really care about. I think this was a bigger thing when I was a kid, but I don't know how many of you have heard the Tokyo Olympics have been officially postponed. So, why do people care? Why should we care about it? Well, maybe as Americans, certainly we're going to feel bad for the athletes that have been training so long to be a part of that, to be a part of the Olympics. If I remember correctly, I think there was I think there was a local wrestler that maybe had made it to the Olympics. But, this is part of what's going on in our country right now, guys, okay? The Prime Minister of Japan is looking at this and saying, over how many years the Tokyo is known for, I believe, 8 or 9 years that they were going to host this event. So they've built stadiums. They've poured millions and millions and millions of dollars. The government, businesses, big businesses, medium-sized businesses, small businesses are borrowing money because they knew that one day when the Olympics came and people came from all over the world, they were going to make that money back and then some. And that's one of the things that people are talking about in our country. Last night we talked about what's happening down in Florida, right? The governor of Florida did not, I didn't see anything about it today, but I believe is still not closed the beaches. Businesses down there look forward to this time of the year because this is when they're going to make their money. So if the governor of Florida closes the beaches down in Florida, all of those businesses down there, whether they're the hotels or they're selling souvenirs or whatever they're selling to all those spring breakers, they're going to lose out. They're going to go under, right? They're going to go under. I think about, like, if we think about this locally, if you ever go to Lake George, right? You go to Lake George, let's say in December, you're passing through Lake George. 85 of the businesses are closed. 85% of the businesses are closed. A couple places open. Probably the McDonald's is open. The Stewart's is open. A couple gas stations, right? Maybe a couple restaurants. But most of those businesses are closed because they're making most of their money in the summertime. And I'm sure that our governor is thinking about that right now, right? I don't know what Memorial Day is this year. May 26th, right? May 26th. Lake George comes alive because it's Memorial Day weekend. The Great Escape opens, or Six Flags, or whatever it's called now. So the governor is weighing that. He's saying, hey, if the Great Escape is still closed at this point, the tourism that we've built in upstate New York could get hurt. So, what does he do? And that's a couple months away, right? But today he made it pretty clear. I don't know how many of you guys watched the news conference today, but Governor Cuomo made it very clear. He said, my mother is important. Your mother is important. And we cannot put any dollar sign on life. So, I think our governor has made it very clear, whether you agree with him or not, that until this is past us, the economy of New York State comes second. The health of New Yorkers come first. I'll do a Q&A. I will do a Q&A, guys. Just let me get some stuff out, and then we'll do a Q&A. Who is Meat and Cheese Hun? Who is that, by the way? Anyway, I'm glad. I'll be honest with you, my friends. I love politics. I love government. I wouldn't want to be the president right now. I wouldn't want to be the governor right now. These decisions are very, very difficult. So here's one of the things that the president did today, or I'm sorry, the president did yesterday. He signed an executive order, right? So sometimes we have laws made, a bill is made in Congress, in the Senate, in the House. The president signs it. Go watch, what is that called? Oh, Schoolhouse Rock, right? How a bill becomes a law. So that's one way we get laws. The other ways things happen is that the president can sign an executive order. And we all know from class that the one way the government checks an executive order is by the Supreme Court saying, no, this executive order is unconstitutional. In U.S. history, we talked about sanctuary cities, right? President Trump, when he first came into power, said, I want to take money away from sanctuary cities. The Supreme Court said no. Can't do it. Congress gave him the money, give him the money, leave him the money. Anyway, let's go back. President Trump wrote an executive order that says companies cannot price gouge. Okay? Can't price gouge. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's say that I owned a business where, perfect example, I made ventilators, right? That's probably one of the things you guys have been hearing about. We need ventilators. Governor Cuomo is saying that we're going to need 30,000 more ventilators in New York State when, this whole thing peaks. We're going to need 30,000 more. Well, let's say I made ventilators, and ventilators cost $10,000 each. Governor Cuomo called me up. He said, hey, Mr. Martin, listen, Martin Ventilator Factory, I need 20,000 ventilators. And I said, sure, no problem, Governor Cuomo, but now they're going to be $20,000 each. That's what we would call price gouging, okay? I'm taking advantage of a situation because I'm a business person. And I'm raising the price, not because the cost of making the product has gone up for me, but because I'm taking advantage of a situation. So when the hurricane hit New York 9 years ago, and where I live in the Schoharie Valley in Middleburg, we were hit hard. There were a few businesses that started to price gouge. And the governor at the time wrote an executive order stopping it. So that's one of the things that our president has done. He's written an executive order. You're going to be punished by the federal government if you're caught price gouging. And one of the things that our governor has asked our president to do is to enact what's called the Defense Production Act. So the Defense Production Act basically says this. The government gave itself power that it could tell a business, you need to start making things, and you need to start making more of these things. Why? Because our country's safety is being threatened. Now, at the time it's created, it was created because of war, right? So we could say, Canada has attacked America, right? Whoa, Canada's attacked America. We need more tanks. Well, GE, you're going to stop making solar panels and you're going to start making tanks. That's the purpose of this act. Governor Cuomo is saying, hey, President Trump, and we've talked about this a little bit, states' rights, national rights, state powers, federal powers. He's saying to the president, please enact this. Tell companies, stop making these products and make ventilators. Or companies that are making the products we need, you need to start going 24/7. And that is one of the things that President Trump is trying to do. He hasn't enacted this yet, not that I know of. But he has talked to some of the companies that, for instance, are making the chemical or the not chemical masks, the medical masks. And I know one company, is it Honeywell, that I think is located in Rhode Island. They are now, instead of making things for 8 hours a day, they are going to do around the clock. They are bringing in more people. They are going to do multiple shifts around the clock to make more things. Apparently, the federal government ordered something like 500 million of these medical masks. That's what they think we're going to need. So one of the things, when in office hours on Google Meet, which is still weird for me, and this is a little weird for me, but I'm not going to lie, I'm having fun with it. We've talked about where is this going to go? When are we going to be back? And this is what I guess Governor Cuomo and his medical experts believe, is that in 14 days, we are going to hit the apex. We're going to hit the worst of the worst for this disease, for this virus. And hopefully at that point, numbers should start going down. But today, there were 26,000 cases in New York. The second highest state in the country was California with 2,800. Washington State has 2,200. Florida has 1,200. Massachusetts has 800 cases. So we are, without a doubt, overwhelmingly, we have the most cases as a state across the country, but most of our cases are downstate, right? In Westchester County, Dutchess County, New York City. I don't know if we talked about this last night, but because I think I had just heard about it maybe afterwards, after we had talked last night, but England is in full lockdown. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said, if you need to go outside, and you live in England, if you need to go outside, you're going outside for food, you're going outside for medication. That's it. In India, which has a population of 1.3 billion people, that's about 3 times the size of our population, they are on lockdown, right? They are on lockdown. So the other thing that happened today that I wanted to really focus and talk to you guys about, and then in a few minutes, we'll, if anybody has questions, throw some questions out there in the comments. The stock market, right? So the stock market is up and down, up and down, up and down. Why do we care? Well, we care because a lot of people, and I've talked to you guys about this in class, I feel very fortunate that I have a job that has a pension, but a lot of jobs don't have pensions. And where people invest in their future is in 403Bs, in 401Ks, in IRAs, right? In these private investments that you're putting money in every week or every paycheck. And then those investment companies, those financial companies, they're investing in things to grow your money so that one day in the future, you have money to retire on. And the stock market is where a lot of those financial companies are going to take the money you give them and invest in it. So, for instance, in my 403B, for right now, I'm saying, hey, you know what, investment company, be a little risky. Why not? I'm a young man. I have about 18 years left till retirement. So, be a little risky. It's okay. If I lose a little, I got time to rebound, right? So the stock market has been taking a lot of hits lately because people are worried about investing money in things. Last night we talked about, I was actually thinking about getting a new roof put on my house, but I said to myself, I pumped the brakes. Maybe this isn't the time for me to do it. So, but today we saw a little bit of resurgence in the stock market, and that's because of confidence, right? So how does the stock market itself work? When people look at the stock in the company, right, the value of it, it's based on the confidence of how well you think that corporation is going to do. So, for instance, if we go back to 2008, GM, General Motors, was at one time one of the biggest corporations in our country, and it was about to fall apart. And the confidence in GM plummeted. And what happened was the stock actually got to such a low price. The Dow Jones Industrial pulled the stock off the market because it plummeted so low. And that's because people had lost confidence in it. So today, a lot of people are gaining confidence. And apparently, at one point today, the stock market actually rose 13%, which is the highest single increase in the stock market in any one day since 1933. So obviously, there are some people that are looking at the way everything is being handled, and this just isn't our country, okay? Because stocks are traded around the world. There are different markets that work together. People are saying, okay, something seems to be going right. It doesn't mean the virus is getting better, okay? It just means that they have a little bit more confidence in the way things are going. And they're starting to loosen up with their money. We'll see if it sticks. I'm not 100% sure. But I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping that the market remains intact because a lot of people, put their future in it. And, we have a lot of teachers that are retiring this year, and I'm sure that they have stock and investments. And as they're on their way out, they want to be able to have, that to rely on in retirement. So that's all I have for you guys for current events tonight. Some of you asked for Q&A. So why not? If you guys want to ask me a question about things that are going on in the world, I'll do my best to answer it. I can't honestly answer everybody's questions, but if somebody wants to throw a question out there, I'll do my best to answer it. What's going on here? It looks like, oh, you guys have been getting into some. The martial, do I think we should, Christina, you're asking about martial law, and what I think you mean is, oh, you probably can't see that. Martial law. Are you saying should we go into like a military type rule? Is that what you mean, Christina? That we should go into like a military style military style rule? Yeah. I don't know. It's really interesting. Netflix and Amazon Prime have dug up all of these like old movies about viruses and pandemics and stuff, and they've thrown all these movies on. I don't know, as a joke or just because they think we're all locked in here, we're going to watch these movies. And there's one movie called Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman and Rene Russo, a couple other actors. Oh, Morgan Freeman's in it. And that's what happens to this town, is that they get this sickness, and it comes over from Africa. And that's what happens, is the government puts this town under martial law. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're at a point where, we need to see our governor place us under military rule. Other countries have seen that. If you think about like England does not have the population we have, but they're a more densely populated country. So, like where we live, maybe we can do the social distancing a little bit better. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not recommending this, but I wouldn't be surprised if major cities like Boston and New York City, maybe if some of those bigger cities went under martial law. But I don't think we're gonna get there. I don't think we're gonna get there. I think Mackenzie. I didn't look up Putin and his lions. Mackenzie brought up last night that, I don't know, Vladimir Putin is releasing lions on the street of Moscow or something like that. But I didn't. I forgot. You know what? All right, Mackenzie, I'm writing a note. I have my reminder sheet, and I will look that up for tomorrow night. Lions in Moscow. I will look that up for you. Okay, what else do we have? Show us. Oh, my son. Tig is not here right now. Tig is at his mom's tonight. Otherwise, he probably would come and say hi to you in his very. I've got a very deep, serious voice. I'm 13 and I know everything. So, like you guys, he's a teenager and he knows it all. What other questions you guys have? He'll be here tomorrow. Tig will be here tomorrow. Well, I'll wait for another question to pop up. I'll talk to you guys. We talked last night about the stimulus bill. Again, as of the time I went live, I just choked on a little piece of ice. At the time I went live, still no agreement on that stimulus bill. Maybe they've come up with an agreement. Mackenzie, I'll get right there. I'll answer that. But so Democrats and Republicans still have not agreed on how they should borrow money. That's probably already been figured out. But how the money is going to go out to Americans, right? Because we want people spending money. The way our economy thrives, the way we have a healthy economy is that people are spending it. I don't know if you guys heard about this, and I don't think I talked about this last night. But some banks, and I know the bank here in Middleburg, was limiting withdrawals. So what they were saying was that you could only at any one time take out $500 in cash, right? So what they're worried about, I mean, the banks are being smart. They're worried about what happened during the Great Depression. Confidence went down. So people said, okay, I don't trust these banks anymore. I'm going to take all my money out of the bank. How do banks work? Banks take your money and they don't, take the money and like put it on a shelf. Hey, this is Mr. Martin's money and we're just going to leave it there. They take the money and they invest it, right? That's how they make money. They take the money and they loan it out. So if they don't have that cash on hand, well, that's bad news for them. So so banks, at least around here, and I'm assuming in a bunch of different places, this is not the government telling them. This is they are coming up with their own rules and saying, we're only going to let you take out so much cash at any one time because they don't want to get a panic on. So Mackenzie asked about this test. I didn't, Mackenzie, hear about this test that Vice President Pence brought up. However, one of the medical professionals that was with the governor today was talking about being able to test people that we know have already had the coronavirus and then fought it off themselves, right? Because then they've developed some kind of antibody, right? They have something in their immune system that helped them fight it off. So I know that's one of the things that the medical professionals were talking about today was testing people that they knew might have had it. I guess, I'm not too sure if this is true, but there's this estimate that they think 80% of the people that get it will fight it off, and they might not even know about it. So, but what can help them? What can help them unlock and create a vaccine? Unlock, the medical term. Maybe Mr. Barr or Miss Bartone or Miss Mitchell could help me here. whatever it is about the virus that our bodies are fighting naturally. If they can figure that out, then they can create a vaccine. So I know that's one of the things that they're talking about testing. Um, but I didn't hear specifically what the vice president was talking about. Nathan, I don't know when schools will be back in session. I hope soon, because I'll be honest with you, I'm tired of sitting in front of this computer. I really am. Oh, so they're trying to come up with like a home test? What is going to happen with healthcare, considering that even getting tested is $1,000, which is scaring people? Oh, I see. You know what, Christina? That's a good question. If I'm assuming if you have healthcare, that you're going to be covered. And I know that the governor has said that he is going to help out with people that don't have healthcare and getting covered. He has said, he said some pretty bold things today. He said, get us the ventilator, get us the people, get us the nurses. They're pulling nurses out of retirement right now, right? They're saying, hey, doctors and nurses that have recently retired or maybe retired at an early age, please come back. We need help. And what he said was that when the apex is over, when the worst of it is over here, he will pay. He'll take state money and he'll help pay to send the ventilators that we borrowed or bought to other states and help send medical professionals to other states. So, healthcare costs are a big problem. Our country is one of the countries that still struggles with it. Many people feel that it should be private, that private companies should own and control and run our healthcare system, and other people want the government to step up. We do not have universal health care in our country, ladies and gentlemen. We do have universal health care if you're over the age of 65. You are on what's called Medicare, right? In 18 short years, I will get universal health care. I'll go on Medicare. I'll go on the government plan. That's a system we enacted and then expanded it was enacted in the 30s and then expanded in the 60s to help people, mad old people like me, right, with their health care. I can't work anymore. So, when you get to that age and I need health care, so the government helps people with health care. We don't have that. The Affordable Care Act is the government subsidizing and helping people get health care. It's not universal health care. Other countries, Germany, England, Canada, Holland, Norway, Sweden, a lot of European countries have universal health care. You're born, you're a citizen in that country, you get health care. That is what people call a socialist program, and they are correct. It is a program that is based in socialism or in the ideals of socialism. So people in our country don't like that. So the cost of healthcare, it's a lot of money, right? In 2008, the number one reason that people were going bankrupt, declaring bankruptcy was healthcare costs. What else we got here? Hey guys, leave your drama out of the live chat here. I'm trying to take questions. Anybody got any other questions? I saw Miss Gussie was in here. We've got a bunch of cool people in here tonight. Well, a lot's going on in the world, my friends, and we're getting there. We're getting there. I think I hope to see everybody soon. I hope that this doesn't go on longer than it needs to, but right now we're playing this balancing act. Do we get things going again and keep the economy rolling? Or do we say, hey, we need to do this lockdown to keep us healthy? So in our country, we have often balanced things. After 9/11, our country had been attacked, and we said, is our security as a country more important than our privacy, right? And at that time, the government enacted the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act is that law that the government uses from time to time. It is still parts of it. Excuse me. Parts of it are still intact, and it allows the government to spy, listen in on phone calls, on texts, on emails, and those types of things. Are they actually sitting there and someone's listening to emails or listening to emails, listening to phone calls, and actually spying and watching what you're typing in emails? No, right? They have these incredible super programs that scan our emails and scan our text, and they look for keywords and phrases and things like that. But that was a time when we said we want to give up. We're okay with giving up a little bit of privacy as long as it makes us more secure. And it hasn't worked, maybe, because our country has not seen a terror attack like 9/11 since that time. So maybe it has worked. And now we're just trying to balance. Should we leave the beaches of Florida open, keep the economy rolling, and roll the dice with this health problem that's happening in our country? Like I said last night, I think I'm surprised at how many college students are down in Florida, and I'm worried if that one part of all this is going to come back to bite us, right? Because those kids down in Florida, they're from all different states, right? So if one of them gets it, or one of them has it, and will quickly spread it, to dozens and dozens of people, well, potentially dozens of those people will then, bring it back to whatever states they're from. So we shall see what tomorrow brings. But I'm really happy that so many people are showing up, and I'm really having a lot of fun reading to you guys. Tomorrow night, we'll find out what happens with Adam and Ruth Simmons, and we will take it from there. And I'll try to bring more cheerful current events to you. It won't be, try not to be so serious. I am going to give another shout out again to Bon Jovi. I saw he's posting more videos. He's posting more things. He's really doing, I think, kind of a stand-up job of just saying, hey, guys, hang in there, right? He wrote this new song and released it today. And I think the name of the song was Do What You Can, right? So, right now, maybe we can't do all those great things. We can't go outside. We can't, do every little thing that we want to do. This is the time of the year where we crack open the windows and we get out of the house. And maybe we can't do that right now, but there are things that we can do to keep ourselves going. So with that, again, I miss you guys. I want to be back in the class, and I want to see you guys and help you get through it. I want to help you guys become those young people, well, not young people, turn from being young people into old people like me, but become the people that you want to become one day, whether it's, going out into the workforce in the military or college. So I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow night, and have a good one, guys.